Hello, Dental A Team listeners. This is Kiera Dent, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for being part of my Dental A Team family. I seriously love doing this podcast. I thought I was going to hate it, and I love it. I love it so much because I get to connect with you. I get to hear how this podcast is helping you and your practice be better. So if you have loved this podcast and you are willing to share, I would greatly appreciate if you'll share with your friends, if you'll leave us a review, if you'll give us 5 stars, anything you can do. Just like you guys grow your practices, we're trying to grow this podcast to positively impact the world of dental. This is how we get to grow our Dental A Team family. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome to the Dental A Team podcast. We're your hosts, Kiera Dent
and Dr. Mark Costas.
Mark and I had this crazy idea that maybe we could combine a dentist and a team member's perspective because let's face it, dentistry can be a challenging profession with those two perspectives. And Dental A Team podcast was created.
I'm a practicing dentist, a multiple practice owner, a dental performance coach, and the founder of the Dental Success Institute.
I've been a dental assistant, treatment coordinator, scheduler, biller, office manager, current practice owner, and international dental consultant. Mark and I don't just understand you, we are you.
Our goal is to positively impact the world of dentistry by sharing our lessons learned from the road in hundreds of dental offices.
2 perspectives, 1 mission, to help dental professionals reach their full potential. Welcome to the Dental A Team podcast. Alrighty, guys, it is our Monday morning mashup. What does this mean for all of you that are just joining us? That means our episode today is going to be one of those episodes that you can share with your team to use for your team meeting. We made these specific for you so that way those meetings are hard to come up with. Whether you have your meetings on Monday mornings, Tuesday mornings, Wednesday mornings, I don't really care. But these are a topic for you and your team to jump in together, share with one another this podcast, and make your meetings easier, more effective, and productive. All right, let's get started with our Monday morning mashup.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Dentalpreneur podcast and the Dental A Team podcast.
Dental A Team.
Hey, Kiera Dent, how you doing? We're doing another crossover episode because this actual episode is so relevant to the dental team and to the CEOs and executive suite within your dental practice. So I cannot wait to dig in here. On a previous episode, our previous crossover episode, Kiera and I talked about quarterly calibration meetings. I talked about how we run our quarterly calibration meetings and what we do to improve, to sharpen the saw, as Stephen Covey would say, to sharpen the saw and make our practices better for actually patient experience and more efficient for the team. So, Kiera, today I want you to take over and talk about how you run an executive team or management team quarterly meeting.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I think this is funny because I feel like you and I usually have switched roles. So before we even got on the podcast, I told Mark, I said, I can't even wait to do this. Mark, you're totally going to geek out on this with me. And I just can't wait because it's fun. It's exhilarating. And I think it's exhilarating because Mark, I honestly, and I never shared this with you, but for the first, year, 2 years of running my own business, I was struggling and I was too prideful or too naive to tell you that I was having a hard time in the business. Cash flow was really hard for me, having a lot of issues, and Traction literally flipped my business around and has made it so much fun, which is why I think I'm so passionate because I am a living proof that these models work. And so I'm just so excited to share with you guys these quarterly meetings and it's funny because Kaylee and I will reserve a room for 8 hours and it's just the two of us sitting there and I feel ridiculous, but it's so powerful. So I'm ready to just geek out with you and we're going to go over the Traction Style EOS leadership team quarterly meeting of how to do this. So if you're ready, I'm ready.
I'm ready. I will just rewind just for a second for those people that didn't hear our first crossover episode. There are 2 different frameworks that Kiera and I consistently use when we're running meetings. Her preference is the EOS, which is the Entrepreneur Operating System in Traction by Gino Wickman. I like to run my meetings based on a format from the 4 Disciplines of Execution, which was written by Sean Covey, son of the late, great Stephen Covey, where he talks about wildly important goals, which is our big our big annual goals. We have lead measures, we have lag measures, we have a cadence of accountability, which is how often we're actually holding our meetings. That's the main framework that I use for agended meetings in my dental office. Kiera prefers the EOS method of holding meetings. Both are fantastic. And I would say that you would be in great shape if you selected either one. Last episode that we did together, last crossover episode, I went over how I utilize the 4 disciplines of execution framework for holding my quarterly meetings. Today, Kiera is going to take over and talk about how she uses the EOS method from Traction to run her quarterly meetings. So go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, because you're right. Both of them, I think, have so many valuables. And it's kind of funny because I will pull bits and pieces from both of them. Like, I don't set up a yearly goal. I still call it a WIG because I just think the term WIG is funny and it makes sense to me. So whatever you choose to do, I think blending or separating. But yes, in the EOS model, they break it down for you. You can Google EOS Traction quarterly meeting and they will literally give you a step-by-step agenda. And it was kind of crazy because the first time I'm starting to do this with more dental practices, really helping to hone in on leadership teams. And the first time I did this, we kind of detoured off onto what we thought worked best for us. And Tiffany and I just did this at Mark's Mastermind event. And, I shared how I've been doing it for myself. But watching it today, I'm going to give you guys like the breakdown step by step. It was so much more effective today. And I just figure, why do I ever try to branch off from what these brilliant people have already figured out works? I don't know why I keep trying to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, you and I have a tendency to try to reinvent the wheel, don't we, at times?
We just want to feel super cool. Like, hey, we came up with this. And it was better to do it their way this time. So what you always start out with is it is an 8-hour meeting. They recommend you do it off-site. So you go to a different location. And a lot of times you have somebody running these meetings. The reason offices will call me in is because even though I'm not an EOS trainer, I don't claim to be an EOS trainer, I have a lot of team solutions. So when doctors get hung up and they don't have the solutions for teams, I've been a really valuable asset to their meetings to give them some solutions that they can do. Yeah. So you go off site. You do not have to have a mediator, somebody who's there to help run it, facilitate. It is kind of nice because I'm not emotionally attached. So I can go in and I can be very direct and help keep them on track. Because at the end of the day, if you're spending 8 hours away from the office, you better walk away with some pretty darn productive meetings. So the intention is that you develop your quarterly goals to help you get to your annual goal or your WIG at the end of the year. Yeah. And it also helps you forecast out for your 1 year, your 3 year, and your 5 year goals. Okay. So the way they start out is you start out with what they call a Segue, and literally online you can figure out exactly. So this part should take you 30 minutes, and this part should take you an hour, and this part should do 2 hours. So it's really cool. It breaks it down for you minute by minute as far as what you should do as a recommended framework. And I follow this. I literally walk through. So the Segue is where each person talks about something personally and professionally that's going really well. And so it's similar to what Mark said on the last episode of starting out with something positive. It also increases that participation. I love that you have your PETA analogy as well, because really we're following two very similar frameworks on this. But with this, the Segue. And so people talk about something professionally and personally that's going really, really well in their life. And then we also set expectations for the meeting, things that they want to accomplish out of the meeting. And then also they talk about something that's going well in the organization and something that they would like to see differently. Now, this is only for your leadership team. You do not want your entire dental office. If it's a big dental office, the office I was working with, they have 3 locations. So you can do it with 2, or you can have a pretty big team. But it really is focusing in on your leadership team. We're not doing the whole office in these meetings. So like, I don't use my entire consulting team. They don't go to the meetings. It's literally me and my executive team, which right now is Kaylee. And sometimes I'll pull in Tiffany on consulting issues. So that's my leadership team. That's what you're doing on these meetings. So then after you go through the Segue, which should take about 30 minutes, I always do an ice-breaking activity. Today I did telestrations. Last time I did an egg drop. So like just some fun things. It's team building, but just gets them in a really creative space. Once you do that, the next piece that should take about an hour to an hour and a half is the review of the previous quarter. So looking at the financials, looking at the prior quarter's rocks or goals that you put into place to accomplish, And I love this because there's no fluff in it. It's very much accountability. Was it done or was it not done? You either say done, not done. There's no gray areas. So you quickly go through the rocks. And they say if 80% of the rocks have not been achieved from last time, and a rock is a goal that you set in place that will take you closer to your annual goal. So they should be measurable. They should always be SMART. So specific, measurable, attainable. A SMART goal is what it needs to be. But you look back on the last quarter's rocks to see, did everybody accomplish their tasks, or do we have things that we didn't set? Maybe people took on too many tasks, but it's a really good review, and it's a good review of your financials. Pull out your P&L, pull out where your balance sheet is. You review all of that as a company. And then after you go through all of that, you go through your entire vision, core values, focuses. You're looking at where your 10-year target, what your marketing strategy is, your 3-year picture, your 1-year plan. What are the quarterly rocks, and what are the issues holding you back from achieving any of these goals? So this really does take a while. And I thought, gosh, this will be such an easy piece where you can just dive into it. We can, rip it apart really quickly. But it actually was really interesting today because as we were going through this in this office, to make sure that the whole team still was connected to the core values, to make sure that where the company is today compared to where the company was 2 years ago when they built this, are these things still in line, or have we outgrown or changed from what we were? So it's really, really important to get your team and to make sure your leadership team fully buys into the core values, the culture, the focus, the 10-year plan. Today we revamped some of the pieces in the 10-year and the 3-year plan, realizing that what we had set wasn't going to take us where we wanted to be at the end of it. So it's a really good calibration piece to make sure you're super focused in on all of that. So Mark, so far, are you with me? We have gone through about 2 hours into the meeting. This is how far you've gotten on a leadership quarterly training meeting.
I love it. The vocabulary is different, but the whole ideas are so similar. You're talking about, I call it recognition, you call it segue. You're talking about looking backwards at the rocks. We call those lag measures in the 4 disciplines of execution. So far, we have not deviated one bit from the way that we run these meetings. They're just called different things. But what's so great about these 2 authors, Gino Wickman and Sean Covey, is that they're covering all the important basics of getting everybody on board. You're talking about foundational principles. That's what we call them anyway, which is mission, vision, core values. You're recalibrating, really, is what you're doing. You're making sure that everybody sees things the same way. You're making sure that everybody understands the history. So there's no revisionist history, and everybody kind of is on the same page. Like, here's actually what happened. There's no 2 ways about it. It's very black and white when you're looking back at history. So I love what I hear so far.
Awesome. And I love that you just point out that these are such similar models. So that way people don't feel like they've got to choose one or the other. You can see which whenever resonates with you. Lead and lag measures, I had the hardest time building those. I struggled so much. For some reason, my brain cannot connect to a lead or a lag.
Right.
But I can connect to a rock, and that makes sense for me versus a to-do. Those 2 terms work so much better for my brain. Lead and lag works better for Mark. So whatever it is, pick your preference. But again, it's a very similar process. So after you go through all that, you then, and the reason they say to do that is because your focus then is on positivity and also on the core values of the company. So you have already, and what they're doing in this process is you're painting a framework to remind everybody on the leadership team where we want to go, why we're doing this. So then when you build your rocks, and then when you build your issues and you're working through these things as a leadership team, you're reminding yourself of where you want to go so you don't deviate away from the course and waste time, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
And so this is the piece that I flip-flopped. So what we did last time was we built what we call an issues list. And what's super cool is as you're going through all these segue pieces, if somebody comes up with something of, hey, what about, we need to change and we need to figure out patient retention. So that's a piece on here. We're working on that. You don't try and solve it during this time right here. You just put it on what we call an issues list. So anytime, so that way you don't waste time trying to solve issues. We're not to that point. We're just building it because like we said before, you can categorize and clump these together and be more efficient and effective with your time. So you're constantly building this issues list. The issues list can pull from your prior meetings. I know in business, Mark, I'm sure you're the same way. As business owners, we're constantly thinking of all these things we want to change in our business to make it better. This is a great place to put these ideas on a list, because then you can see patterns and you can see what you really should be working on as a team that will move the ball forward the most. Right. So you're building this issues list as you're going through your meeting. You're not actually solving any of the problems. So then the next piece of the meeting is what they call establishing the rocks for next quarter. I thought this was dumb. I thought you should tackle the issues list, figure out what issues there were to build the rocks. So this time we actually built the rocks before we did the issues list, and it was crazy awesome. It takes about 2 hours because you want to make sure you're really building rocks that are going to move your vision forward, that 1 year, 3 year, 10-year plan. And so we built the rocks and we put them for each person. And it was crazy because as we did that, we spent the time doing it. We then looked over the issues list, and I'm not exaggerating, 50% of the items on the issue list. And we had 4 poster boards of paper that I had put up on the wall, 4 of these huge boards. 50% of those issues actually were solved by the rocks that we had established.
Wow.
So talk about
That's
efficiency.
Impressive. Yeah.
And then people are better utilizing their time. We're spending our time solving real issues. So after we did that, the next piece of it is you then tackle the issues. And they say this can take anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. So we spent about, I would say, 3.5 hours tackling issues. And what we did is we looked at our whole board of issues. And from there we said, okay, what do we need to do? What's going to move the ball forward the most? Let's look at everything on these boards that's left over. What do we need to do to solve? And they called it IDS. So identify, discuss, and solve. And so we had to figure out, what are we going to solve? And then we came up with 3 of the biggest issues, which were morale. Our other one that we worked on was freeing up the leadership team of time because they were getting caught in the weeds. They weren't having any admin time. And so that was our second one. And then the third one was cash flow. We wanted to figure out why our cash flow and making sure that traditionally this office tends to trail off in the second half of the year, and their production and collection drops exponentially. And so those were the big issues. So then we spent the next 3.5 hours literally going through this and figuring out, and I clumped it together. So I looked at all 4 of these poster boards and we'd say, okay, which one of these would fall under morale that we could solve that would be contributing to morale? Which one of these things are going to contribute to cash flow? Which one of these things will contribute to your schedule? So we literally broke it down and we solved them forever. And instead of adding rocks that weren't necessarily rocks, we would then put them as to-dos. So that would be Mark's lead and lag measures from 4 disciplines of execution. And we're constantly building this. After you build the issue list, and the thing that I struggle the most with this model, and I've just had to let it go, Mark, you and I love to solve things and solve them forever. And I don't like to leave a list undone. It drives me nuts. And yet with traction, you can't try to solve every single piece of the problem, because then you're not focused on actually solving problems. So you actually leave. I left about 5 or 6 things on the issues list today when I left. It drives me nuts because I hate leaving them unsolved.
Totally.
But at the end of the day, we solved, oh my gosh, if you look of these 4 boards, I only had 6 things left on there that we weren't able to accomplish today because we were focused on the other things. So then at the end, what you do is you write the next steps of the things everybody's going to work on. You go over your rocks again to make sure that they're smart, that they're measurable, that we didn't miss anything after going through the issues list. And then at the end of it, we put deadlines on everything, so everything's accountable. And then what you do, and this is always the scariest part for me as a trainer, but we actually rate the meeting. And we rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. And it's really, really fantastic feedback because you base it on, were the expectations met? Did people feel like there was progress in there? And was there any feedback that they would want to give to the meeting? And it's super scary as a trainer to do this, or as a leader for myself and my business, of having them literally rate the meeting on a scale of 1 to 10. But what I will tell you is when I implemented this, I started finding out my meetings that got lower ratings were because I just sat and swirled around an issue without ever solving it and moving it forward. And so you then have everybody rate the meeting on a scale of 1 to 10. And then you conclude, set your next quarterly date so everything's polished up. So that's like in a nutshell the way you literally run a quarterly meeting with your leadership team and how you calibrate getting everybody focused in on it. And it's just fun. It's fun to watch people emerge with new ideas. On the last episode, morale ended up being a cause of the leadership team being too stressed out. I sat there for a good probably hour, mapping out an entire calendar, forcing the team into a different perspective of how to run their meetings and getting it on the set days for every single office. So we had more free time for the admin team, which they could not see. But we sat there and whiteboarded out multiple calendars, multiple options until we could identify what really would be the best for this team. So, Mark, I geek out on this so much because it works so well, and you pinpoint the biggest issues as opposed to just solving what you think are the biggest issues. You actually work as a team to figure out what really it is. So you move the company forward exponentially in a really fast, easy manner.
Can I ask a couple questions, just fundamental questions about, because when you're dealing with issues, another word for challenge, another word for problem, right? So sometimes there's going to be people in the room whose responsibility it is that you are pointing out, that where they are coming up short in a certain responsibility, or I guess for lack of a better word, it's kind of their fault or their department's fault, right? So
sure, totally.
how do you avoid like people getting defensive and this thing degrading into kind of a catty bitch fest?
No, you're so right. And what it is, interaction, they do talk about this. And that's where you assess, is your leadership team right person, right seat for the betterment of the business? And it is hard. So the last quarterly meeting I was at, we kind of like ripped apart the assistant team because the assistant lead was not holding their team accountable. This time there was a pretty big debate on the financial. They did not have their numbers accurate. They were saying that we had a fund of almost like $86,000 left over of profit, but the bank account was showing very minimal money. And we're like, that doesn't make sense. Why are these numbers not being accurate? And she couldn't tell us. So it was, I don't want to say a roast session, but in this, it comes from the leader, so the doctor. And we always talk about at the beginning that we're going to have some healthy discussion, and we're probably going to debate some of these things out, and it's probably going to get uncomfortable. But if all of us can look at what's in the betterment of the business, what do we need to do? And if we can be humble enough, and that's what a true leader is. And that's why I think it's helpful when me or somebody like me can do it with you. They can help steer the conversation so it doesn't turn into that. But the reality is, in a successful, healthy business, these topics need to be addressed. And if you can cultivate a team that's willing to take it on, it doesn't turn into that complaining fest or attacking people. It literally is, what is the issue? What is the solution in the most simple form? And if the whole team can agree to it, even though it's uncomfortable, I mean, and every single person in there, the doctor had to take ownership, the office manager had to take ownership, the billing, like there were so many people that take ownership for this and say, you know what, that was my fault. This is what I'm going to do to solve it. But it takes a while, and you're going to have some. I mean, last time I had a girl almost crying because it is hard. It's hard to hear that. But it was awesome to see her grow from one quarter to the next because she took it on. And she even said in the last meeting, I'm starting to realize I might not be the right person for this position. So it got kind of like weird at that moment. And I said, well, do you want to be in this position? And she said, yes, I do. And I said, okay, do you know the steps you need to take? Let's map those out for you. And she took them, executed, implemented, and therefore was able, and she maintained her leadership position. So in interaction, they talk about it. And it's crazy because the more you do these meetings, the more you do it this style, the more your team develops that culture of very much being intentional on the business and doing what's in the best interest of the business. And people get on board, and it does not become anything negative. It becomes actually really healthy and positive, and you can actually sink right into the main problems and move them forward.
Oh, gosh, it was so good.
But it's kind of scary.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary.
That was really cool. That was really cool, Kiera. I do have to say, we suggest, morning huddles a certain way, and then the weekly growth meetings a certain way, and then these quarterly calibration meetings, you have your style, I have my style. But the importance is that you're having them, and that it's an open dialogue and a safe place, and people aren't getting chippy and defensive. So, but there is kind of, this all kind of comes down on the shoulders of the CEO, not the office manager, but the actual owner of the dental practice as the leader of the entire organization, to have the discipline not only to schedule the meeting, but to make sure that even if, you don't feel like you can sacrifice 8 hours or 3 hours or 2 hours, that you have the discipline to schedule the meeting, keep the meeting, have an agenda, and run it as best you can by using one of these frameworks. It's not going to be pretty in the beginning, for sure. But man, on the other side of it, geez, it's such a growth opportunity. It's such an opportunity for people to really feel like they are part of something that's organized. They really have kind of part in creating the destiny and helping the practice to accomplish its goals. And to give them a purpose for going to work. It's just, I mean, there's so many great reasons to have these agended meetings, and to really, really stick with them.
Absolutely. And I failed to mention, Mark, thank you for bringing up the agenda. With the tracking style, an agenda should be sent out to your team at least the day before, if not the week before, and all the forms that we talked about, the financials, the quarterly rocks from last time, all those should be printed out and handed out. So you do follow that agenda. But you're absolutely right, Mark. And as a team member, because this is what we talk about, as a team member, gosh, had I been in an office that followed this type of structure, that I got to be a part of the growth, I got to be a part of the leadership team, that I could see and influence, and in the quarterly team meetings, like this would have been so dreamy. Because I will tell you, in my dental career, not a single practice that I worked for had this type of structure to it. And as a team member, sure, we might think, oh gosh, we've got to have these meetings. The expectations and the communication and the solving of problems, finally solving them, would actually take place. And I'm so envious of all the people that get to be a part of the offices that do this, because this is, I think, what sets apart your really, really, really amazing offices that everybody wants to work for. Or it also helps eliminate people fitting the mold of the practice you want to be running. So from a team member's perspective, I wish so badly the offices I work for would have done something like this, because I think it could have, I know it would have moved our practice forward, and it would have helped with so many of the issues that never ever got resolved that kept coming up over and over again. For sure.
This is awesome. What a great facilitator, and what a great structure for a meeting. Great job, Kiera. I really, really learned a lot. I really did. And you know what we should do is you should attend one of my quarterly calibration meetings, and I should attend one of your EOS calibration meetings, and we should compare, contrast, and borrow from one another, which is what we do really well.
Totally agree. And I love it. That's why, guys, when Mark and I get on the mics and we share with you, whomever you can resonate with, or both of us, pull different pieces that resonate from Mark, that resonate from me, and make it your own. Because when it's your own, you take ownership of it. You'll execute and implement. And at the end of the day, I say, just try. I had no clue how to run my first meeting. I was terrified out of my mind. I was scared today to go do it. But at the end of it, Mark, I'm sure the first time you started running quarterly meetings, it was scary and awkward, and it just feels unnatural.
Yeah, the weekly growth meetings too. I mean, those are awkward in the beginning when people have to stand up and participate, and you have people sitting around with folded arms and a scowl on their face because they feel like they're wasting their time. And right. Yeah, in the beginning it's tough. It's very, very challenging in the beginning, but you have to get over that hump, and once you do, on the other side of it is a lot of growth and positivity for the practice, for sure.
Definitely. So I say go try it. Whatever it is, try something. Look to see what you're doing. Ramp up your quarterly meetings if you're doing them. If you're not, stick it on the calendar. We're just, we're whatever quarter you're wrapping up. I mean, I did mine in the middle of a quarter because I said, I read this. I don't want to wait until next quarter. We're going to start it now. We're going to execute and implement it, and we'll try it, because the only way I'm going to figure out if it works or not is if I try it out. So for all of you, try something like this, because this, I think, is what literally will set you apart from a base level practice to an elite practice, which we're all trying to get to. Whether you're a team member or a doctor or in between, whatever you are, I truly do believe quarterly meetings are a massive piece of growth and success to the highest level.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks, Kiera. Cool. Gosh, we got to spend some good QT together today. Hopefully it's not too long before we get to do this again.
I agree. Thank you again. And thanks for always making time for these. I really appreciate it.
All right. So for all you awesome peeps for the Dental A-Team podcast and the Dentalpreneur podcast, thank you guys so much for listening. This is Mark Costas and Kiera Dent signing out.
That wraps it up for another episode of the Dental A-Team podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.